Hello to everybody who's joining us. We're just going to wait for the John Jr. clock to chime noon here, and we'll get started. So I have some Christmas music on to get us in the mood for the holiday in about a week. So welcome. Just going to wait for the clock to chime, and then we'll get on our way. Welcome to everybody who's coming in. We're going to get started as soon as the clock behind us here chimes. Thank you all so much for joining us. All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. We might be interrupted by the clock here. It's running a little bit behind. But welcome to Pottsgrove Manor. This is week 3. This is our final live video of our 3-part live holiday tour here at Pottsgrove. And it's also our final live video of 2020. So thank you all so much for joining us. In case you don't know, Pottsgrove Manor is owned and operated by the County of Montgomery in Pennsylvania. We are a part of their Parks, Trails, and Historic Sites. My name is Neil Hobbins, and I am the Historic Site Supervisor here at Pottsgrove. I don't know what it's like for you sitting at home, but we are a week away from Christmas. We are, all that excitement is really building up. We got our first snow of the Christmas season here at Pottsgrove. So we are full-fledged ready to go. So the first week we explored the preparations for the holiday season here at Pottsgrove Manor. Last week Kendra looked at what it was like to have people who were visiting for the holiday season in that build-up for the celebration of 12th night. And this week we're going to be talking about 12th night parties, what went into that, as well as looking at how the servants and enslaved of the household also celebrated the holiday season. So if you're just joining us, welcome. Feel free to comment, ask as many questions as you would like, and I will try to answer them as much as possible. Please let us know where you're joining us from. Are you trapped under over 20 inches of snow, like some people in Pennsylvania, or did you get a light dusting like others did? So welcome. So to orient you into the house this week, this is the other front parlor. We often refer to it as the dining parlor of the household here. And what you see here set up in the dining parlor of the household is that 12th night celebration with 2 of our Potts family members dressed and ready to celebrate that 12th night here in the household in their finest, dressed up, as well as you'll see the dessert table and holiday treats lined up behind me here. I'm going to bring you a little bit closer so you can see some of that, and we'll talk about what treats look like here in the 18th century. So we're going to start down here. And what you're seeing on this table is a couple really interesting things. The first thing is kind of that overindulgence that we talked about a couple weeks ago. We're now seeing it in its final form. So 2 weeks ago, we saw that they were purchasing sugar and preparing for the holiday celebration, and here it is in its form. Things like cookies, dried fruits, were often consumed. You can see a whipped syllabub that was there. Syllabub was a pretty popular beverage in the 18th century. It's kind of like a beverage and a dessert mixed into one. It contained sweetened wine. Typically another style of spirits was added into it. It would be whipped with cream so that it would make kind of like a cream beverage, and then you would let it sit for hopefully days, and it would begin to separate to the point that a good syllabub, you could flip over it almost like a Dairy Queen Blizzard, and nothing would drop out. So it was a highly alcoholic, kind of a whipped topping with a sweetened alcoholic wine underneath of it. So that's what we see on the bottom tier there. Also, other things that we're noticing beyond the dried fruits and the nuts, which might be a little bit different, is things like marzipan. And marzipan was going to be used for a couple of different things in the 18th century. You could have made it to create these tiny little treats like you see here that would be made to resemble different fruits and nuts, things like that, and then beautifully colored and decorated. As well as my favorite little guy over here, which marzipan would have been used to make a hedgehog for the holiday season. So that's marzipan that has blanched almond slivers stabbed into it to make what would look like a hedgehog, which was pretty popular during the 18th century. When we get back to that sugar, and we talked about sugar 2 weeks ago quite a bit, sugar can be made into multiple different things. One of the things you might see is a sugar paste or sugar plate, as is referenced in the 18th century. Essentially, it's kind of the 18th century version of modern day fondant. That would be made to craft all different types of things. You could put them in molds, like you see with the swans here. It could also be put into another wood mold and then painted and hand painted. This is a thistle. And then it could also be molded into shapes like this orange that you see here that could be used. And these are kind of twofold. They present a really nice look on the table, and they act as decoration, as well as they would then be broken into and used in the party itself. And going over to our other table here, you see that kind of common theme of sweets, rich, being replayed again. Any guesses what this might be out there? See if anybody responds. So I know you're working a little bit behind here, but this here is a sugar gazebo. So this is completely made out of sugar. This would be all hand carved, either by the chef on premise or by a pastry chef that's local or in Philadelphia. This again would be used as a decoration, and then as the night went on, it could be opened up and made into sugar for different beverages throughout the evening. So again, sugar, all pure sugar, used as decoration, making everything look nice, look high end. They're decorating with something that's extremely expensive in the 18th century, but then they're also going to have a practical use to it when they open it back up again. Over here, we see our gingerbread tower. Just very simple gingerbread tower. It is real. It smells amazing. It is decorated as a kind of a tree. It's just gingerbread that has been layered on top of each other, and then the sugar has been melted as a frosting that's been put over top. And then real close, if you notice, there is candied ginger on there. So lots of sugar in this room, lots of sweets in this room that are going on. I'm going to go ahead and bring us now into our kitchen, which is just off here. You'll see us kind of come in here. And if you haven't been here to Pottsgrove before, you might think it's a little odd that we just kind of came through a doorway into a kitchen here. This is not the actual Potts kitchen. The original Potts kitchen was torn down sometime in the early 1800s by a gentleman by the name of Daniel Hittner. We're not exactly sure how the Potts family kitchen sat in relevance to the house. This does not balance out the house, which was typical during the 18th century Georgian time period. But this is a great, fantastic reproduction of an 18th century kitchen. It allows us to cook in here, many of what you've seen over the last year with our videos, as well as when we're normally open, it holds some fantastic demonstrations by well-known culinary historians here. So here we are in the kitchen. It's rather quiet here today. We are closed to the public currently, so it is a quiet place to be right now. But during the 18th century, this would not be a quiet place at all, as the cook and his staff would be in here busily preparing for possibly different celebrations throughout the holiday Christmastide season. We talk about Twelfth Night. We reference Twelfth Night quite a bit. Twelfth Night is typically celebrated on January 6th. But celebrations that focused around the holiday season happened all throughout the Christmastide season, starting as early as the beginning of December, somewhere around December 6th, and lasting into and past 12th night and later January. So this was an extremely busy place, as they were constantly preparing large meals, as well as all those different sugar-based culinary confections for dessert tables. I'll bring you a little bit closer to the table here, and we'll show you some of the different things that are on this table. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the actual meals that were served here. Meals in the 18th century typically focused around 3 separate courses. Those courses had anywhere from 6 to 12 dishes, possibly less, possibly more, served at any given time. We do know that the Potts family was not 100% self-sustaining. And what I mean by that is, when we evaluate the ledgers throughout the Potts family, we see that, especially when it comes to meats, sides of beef, venison, veal, pork, was ordered in through the ledgers and being brought up to the household itself, as well as different things would have come from the household also. It is December, so there's not a whole lot of freshness that's going to be focused here. There is going to be a lot of preserve. You had the ability to kind of preserve, especially root vegetables, possibly in a cellar at the time. You could lay sawdust or sand down, and that would allow you to preserve things like carrots and potatoes throughout the long winter season. But this would be prepared anytime there was guests in the household. You would have these formal meals, and especially with celebrations such as weddings, as well as kind of their own parties at the time, would be prepared. So it was a constant going and coming of constant work in the kitchen here, done by a cook and the staff that was working here. We are not sure of the name. We're not sure of whether they were paid or indentured or enslaved. There's really no reference to it in any of the ledgers that we've been able to find so far. Moving over here, you see kind of more of those goodies of the holiday season, of the sugar, with kind of the highlight here being the 12th night cake. So you may have seen from Kendra's video, I believe it's 2 weeks ago now, where she focused on highlighting a 12th night cake. And this is really going to be the big centerfold of tradition during the 12th night celebration. And when we talk about 12th night, Kendra had spoke about it last week. We've definitely referenced it a couple different times now. Kids were typically not a part of the party and the celebration at the time. Kids may have come down, they would have sang or entertained a little bit, and then typically one child was chosen to help with the 12th night cake. And the reason behind that is, inside of the 12th night cake has been baked possibly 1, maybe 2 trinkets. And the child is going to be chosen to help portion out this cake so that everything was given out equal. And that's pretty popular during the time of equality. If you served in the military, it's still something that could be used today, where kind of somebody turns away, and when things are issued out, there's no preference given. And that's essentially what this child is doing, as they're pure of heart. So they're going to be telling who is to receive that piece of cake, and then who was ever to get the trinket in there could possibly be the king of 12th night. If they had 2, it would be the king and queen of 12th night. And it meant many of different things. Some of these 12th night parties were extremely raucous, and being the king and queen, you can kind of order around your subjects and have a joker. But you could also be as just simple as the king of 12th night was expected to host the next 12th night party, and the queen of 12th night was expected to bake the next 12th night cake. So it really depended on how that household celebrated at that time and how the tradition focused. But the 12th night cake would definitely be the centerpiece of that celebration at the time. So here's our kitchen. I'm going to take you around. We have our hearth, which is fantastic to cook in. And we're going to end up here in the final room. And if you've been to the house before, this is technically given as John's office. We debate the history on that all the time, and that is a whole other video for a whole other time. But what we currently have it set up because of the COVID-19 restrictions is showing Boxing Day for the servants and the enslaved persons of the household. And I'm not going to give too much away because our next video series coming up this Wednesday will focus on Boxing Day and the history and origin of that day. But we have to understand that we've talked about it many times. The servants and enslaved persons, this was an extremely busy time for them. This was a time with many tasks to do. Much traveling was happening during this time for them as they were picking up goods and dropping goods off and moving it around. One thing that isn't often spoke about is that as the Potts family may have traveled away from Pottsgrove Manor here at the time, often, especially their higher class servants and into the higher middling class servants, would travel with them. And they would go to another manor house where the Potts family were staying to help the servants in that manor house prepare for the celebrations. So this was definitely a time that was extremely busy. And Boxing Day emerges in the 18th century as a more formal holiday for the servants and enslaved persons. Traditionally, it's celebrated on December 26th, the day after Christmas, but we do know that the servants and enslaved of a household like this, their days off would have been dependent upon what they were being called on to do. Sometimes duty-specific, job-specific, meant different days off than other servants and enslaved. So they could sit down all together to celebrate, or it could be a couple here and there throughout the holiday season. But what we do know is during Boxing Day, one of the origins of possibly getting its name is the boxing of gifts given to the servants and enslaved of the household in a wealthy 18th century house. And that tradition is a way to give back to the people who are working for the Potts family. And our ledgers support that. When you look at our ledgers, there is fabric and sewing notions that are being purchased that are not of the status of the Potts family. They are much of a lower status. So even though it doesn't necessarily say for Boxing Day gifts, we can assume that what is being purchased is going towards the Boxing Day gifts themselves. They would also have a celebration of their own involving food, things that might not necessarily be on their table traditionally throughout the holiday season. So this was definitely a day to relax. It was a joyful day for them, a day of celebration. It was also a day of reflection. They had been going and going and going. And all of a sudden they kind of get this time to sit and think about where they are in life, where they've come, as well as look towards their plans for the new year. And that's where I'm going to end it. And we're in the same boat. We are, like I said, this is our last live video of 2020. A year ago, I don't think if you told me I would be standing here in a house that's completely vacant a week before Christmas, I would have believed you. But here we are. In 2020, especially now as we get towards the end, it's a time of reflection. So as the Historic Site Supervisor here, I first want to say thank you to everybody, whether you're just joining us for the first time today, or you've been with us since the beginning of this new journey for us in March and April. Thank you for being here, thank you for supporting us, and thank you for joining us in our different live videos and our different pre-recorded videos. This is definitely not the end for us for 2020. We still have 2 more pre-recorded videos to release here in December, as well as our last pre-recorded will be the first thing we do in 2021 on January 6th. But thank you all so much I hope that everybody has an extremely enjoyable holiday season. Thank you so much from myself as well as all the staff. That will be Amy Reese, Ann Shipley, Kendra Beers, Tom McCardle, everybody who's involved with the County of Montgomery and the Parks, Trails, and Historic Sites. Thank you all so much for your support throughout this past year. We hope to see you again in 2020. Be safe, enjoy your holiday, and have a blessed and welcomed New Year. Thank you all so much.